Hi, I'm Candace Michelle, and this is Our Community. Disasters and emergency management have been top of mind lately, thanks to the recent earthquakes off the Mendocino coast and the wildfires in Los Angeles. Both instances underscored for me the types of disasters we are susceptible to here in Curry County and the need for a plan for both preparedness and response. My guest today is Jeffrey Hughes, Curry County's new emergency manager. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure being here.
It's really nice having you here. I met you recently at a presentation that you were doing at the Harbor Fire Hall. I think that was a few weeks ago. And you were talking about having a plan and what disasters could come and how to get prepared and all of that stuff. And I found it absolutely fascinating.
Okay, very good. That's kind of what I was going for.
Good.
And my biggest push right now for emergency management, other than trying to get the county together and ready and whatnot, and increase the county's ability to increase our ability to respond to emergencies for our citizens, but also to educate our citizens so they can be better prepared for helping themselves through those very same circumstances that we face.
And everything depends on what kind of a disaster it is, right? I mean, there's a big difference between it being a wildfire and being a tsunami.
There is a bit of a difference there, of course. One, the threat's coming from the ocean, and the other one, the threat's from wherever it happens to be burning, of course.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, just generically being prepared for one incident will help you be generically prepared for a different incident. And a lot of times the incident preparedness plans that people have, there's a lot of overlap with them, and they will just help you be generally more resilient to other types of emergencies that happen in our community.
So you are now the emergency manager for Curry County. And how long have you been in that position?
Since I think the middle of August of last year.
Is it like a lot?
So it's a bit of a learning curve. Every day I'm learning something new. My background isn't necessarily in emergency management per se. So a lot of things I'm learning are the grant writing, the funding for all these positions, for these programs and things like that, and then making sure that the mandatory programs that the county needs to provide and needs to have updated are on course for being updated on time and are available and actually are effective and that sort of thing. So that's kind of what my day-to-day job is right there.
Mm-hmm. And you're in charge of then coming up with a plan? Is that part of your remit, is to come up with a plan?
To an extent, yes. Obviously, I want to make sure that we have a good, effective plan that covers the majority of our citizens, the majority of the incidents we're going to face. A lot of what I do is sometimes as far as plans go, we have separate plans for separate things. We have a community wildfire plan. We have a natural hazard mitigation plan. We have the emergency operations plan, which is kind of an overarching plan for the county and that sort of thing. So there's several different types of plans that all kind of work together to cover the county and the citizens of Curry County and help us prepare and work our way through those incidents as they come up. So that's, like I said, my day-to-day job is making sure those plans are up to date and see where the downfalls are in those individual plans and other types of things that need to be updated, and then try to get those things fixed up as rapidly and correctly as I can. So.
And getting it to the public, as you say, that's the challenge, right? Because you can have all the plans in the world, but if I don't know what the plan is, I'm going to still be sitting in front of my computer as the tsunami washes me away.
That is the biggest challenge I face, is trying to get information out to the public. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons I went out for the community outreach programs following the tsunami warning from the 5th of December was to make sure that I reached as many citizens as I could. I was getting a lot of the similar questions from folks calling the office, wanting to know, hey, how did this happen? Why did this happen this way? And some of the stuff was like, this is stuff I think my citizens should know already. Mm-hmm. But if someone from my office or someone hasn't informed the citizens of that, then why would the citizenry know? So that was a big catalyst for me to try to get out into the public and to make an ongoing plan to be out in the public from here on out in the future, trying to educate folks as to this is what the plans we have for this circumstance. A lot of times it's just a generic plan to cover, say, evacuating an area. And then after that, it's okay, we need to make sure that folks have had the opportunity and the information to make a good plan for themselves, because what will work good for one citizen may or may not be 100% the same plan another citizen needs to have. But it's my job to try to make sure that those citizens receive the information they need so that they can formulate their own plan to keep themselves safe and just generally be a more resilient population. So
I don't think any of us really want to think about it. I mean, I know that there are people who are like, oh yeah, I want to be prepared. But I think most of us are like, I don't want to think about the disaster. Why would I want to think about that?
And I do face some of that a little bit. And one of the things I tell folks who are thinking that way is, you don't have to. It's not something to dwell on. It's not something that necessarily needs to be the end of a completely life-changing or life-altering event. And the more you prepare for it, the more you're educated on it, the less unknown it'll be and the less shocking it'll be when something does happen. Or if you prepare for, like, say, a Cascadia type event, which of course is one of the bigger events we in the Pacific Northwest have to plan for. If you plan for and prepare at least a bit for the Cascadia event, when you have a smaller event or when you have an event that isn't to that level of intensity, it loses a lot of its ability to generate fear. Like, well, this isn't nearly as bad as I thought I was preparing for, so this is an easier day.
Well, I remember sitting in front of the computer when I got the alert on my phone that there had been an earthquake off the Mendocino coast, and then it was not more than a couple minutes later that the tsunami warning came through. And I remember I was like a deer in the headlights, right? I sat there and my first thought was, I don't have a clue what I should do. I don't know where I should go. I mean, I generally know that I should get in my car and go to higher ground if there's going to be a tsunami. But I don't actually have the plan called. First step, go wake up husband and get him out of bed. The second step, get dog and collar it and put it in. I mean, I just don't. I don't. And it was kind of shocking to realize that I was so unprepared.
And a lot of folks found themselves in that circumstance. And another reason I tried to get out in the public was this was a relatively calm incident. We got a warning. It was unexpected. It was unplanned, and gave everybody a chance to test their emergency preparedness plan or actions they wanted to do, or if they didn't have one, to realize they didn't have one.
Right.
But we didn't have a big emergency follow-on to that to really put a real-life test on it. So it was an opportunity for all of us to review how things were and then realize, okay, I got a couple shortcomings here and here on my particular plan or my personal plan or awareness. And this is a good, easy, and relatively low-risk way of fixing that because we didn't have, of course, a large tsunami come ashore. We didn't have a lot of community damage, and there were no reported injuries, thankfully. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I was out afterwards thinking, I really need to use this opportunity as an unplanned kind of surprise test of our community and our responders and everyone else, and make sure we're all utilizing that incident to its fullest value by just saying we've had an emergency test. Did it work? What did we do that worked? What did we do did not work? And gives us an opportunity to fix that without having to worry about whether our house is washed away or whether people have been injured and that sort of thing. So.
It was a great teaching opportunity. You know, I mean, it was great. I'm really glad it wasn't any worse than it was. So how was it for the responders? How did that all go?
So your responders in Curry County did very, very well. We all received our notice the exact same way that citizens did, or most of us did. I received it over my phone as I was sitting at my desk, ironically working on the distant tsunami notification protocol. And from there, we got the earthquake notification. Most all of the folks in at least the two big county buildings there in Gold Beach, we evacuated out to the street. We had a little brief impromptu meeting. In the time that it took between the earthquake notice and the tsunami warning, we decided, okay, I'll check the buildings, make sure we don't have any damage. There's no reported injuries. Let's go back to work.
As I recall, there wasn't a lot of moving and shaking.
I haven't spoken to very few people that actually felt the earthquake. I didn't where I was at. No one else in the county working that day in either the courthouse or the annex that I've spoken to noticed the shaking. And then, of course, after the initial warning for the earthquake, no damage to our buildings.
Right.
Unless we have any aftershocks that are going to affect us, we're probably good to go back to work.
Yeah.
And then we had the tsunami warning, which, of course, that changes things.
Right.
And then shortly after we got the tsunami warning, we got the tsunami impact time or the wave impact time, which was only 20 minutes later. So that really kind of ramped things up from that point.
Right. And that's an interesting thing to have, to know what your time frame is. Because if you've got 5 minutes, that your response is going to be real different than if you've got 25 minutes.
Correct. And most of the tsunami warnings we've had on the coast, at least in relatively recent history, have been distant tsunamis. So we've had hours to respond. So we'll get the tsunami warning, like say the one in 2011 that struck Japan. We had hours to respond to that.
Was there an effect from that? Did we have anything?
So
like
my
maybe
information,
a couple of inches.
My information was, and I wasn't working down here then when that happened. My information was that the biggest effect in Curry County, or actually on the West Coast, was actually Curry County, where at least one group of people didn't receive any warning and were on a river bar down in Pistol River and actually got washed off the river bar. And weren't injured. Ended up surviving that circumstance. And then the information I have is also that there was damage, relatively extensive damage to boats and the dock down at the port of Brookings, the harbor down there.
Yeah.
I was, at the time of that particular tsunami, I was working out of the sheriff's office in Newport, and I don't recall any reported damage up there. But
yeah, it was interesting, and I do remember that there was damage down at the port, but we didn't see any major tsunami come up other than,
Yeah, correct.
And I think the port is always in a zone where it's gonna feel it. That river that goes down. I mean, that's the way the water travels, is up and down. So, yeah. I know that one of my friends said that in Harbor they felt the shaking from the earthquake off the Mendocino coast.
Okay.
But not, I mean, it wasn't intense, right? It wasn't the kind where you go hide under your desk or whatever.
No, the people I've spoken to that actually felt the earthquake said it was very minor. I did speak to one person in Gold Beach who said they felt it, and then they just realized it was an earthquake, and that was kind of the extent of that. So.
Right. One of the things that I noticed at your presentation was you had two big maps that were hanging up. And they were, can you tell us what those maps were?
So those maps were large printouts of the Dogami tsunami inundation maps that are available online. And those will show you different wave heights of expected tsunamis, like say a small to middle-sized tsunami will, and I'm sorry, I can't quote the exact height because I don't remember off the top of my head, but they will show different wave heights of tsunamis and how far inland those are expected to flow. And that is to give folks an idea, if they look on the map, because it is a road map and it shows structures, to be able to find your residence or important locations to you and be able to determine whether that particular spot or your residence or other areas that you're concerned about are either in or out of the immediate inundation zone.
And did you say that they're categorized by the size of the earthquake or the size of the tsunami? Like how do we know?
So it'll have a key on there or a legend that will show you different. It's broken down by different colors.
Okay.
And it will show you the wave height for that particular size of tsunami.
Okay.
I believe it's yellow with a black outline. That's the highest wave height, and that is what are the best guess and determination of a wave height for a Cascadia type event. So my default when I look at that map and when I'm giving folks advice on how far they need to go is look where the highest point that a wave can strike, and that is that bright yellow with a black outline, which is on the map, and get to the other side of that. And if your residence is on the other side of that, or the location you're concerned about is on the other side of that, then that is considered in the safe zone for even a large tsunami, like resulting from a Cascadia type event. And then make your plan accordingly based on that map. They do get updated from time to time. I'm not sure exactly when the last time they were updated, but that's my best advice to folks. If they're curious about whether they live in or out, or whether, say, their kids' school or their church or other types of infrastructure is in the inundation zone, is to go online and check that map system out, and it will show you where the expected wave height would be for different types of events.
And where can we find that map?
So if you Googled either, you can do it any number of ways, but if you Google the Dogami map, and Dogami,
Okay,
yes.
good.
Tsunami map, or even if you just Googled Curry County tsunami map,
Okay.
should take you right to their website, and it'll give you it'll have a picture of the large coastline map of Oregon. And that coastline is broken down by different map sections. And then you just look up that map section that you're concerned about, and it'll bring it up on a digital format. You can print it off, like I had it printed off with the large wall map, or even smaller ones. And a lot of those maps, the handout type maps, are available in the public. I deliver those all the time to different places. And so those are available either at my office down in Gold Beach, or I drop them off at, say, the Visitor Center in Gold Beach, City Hall, Port Orford. I've dropped some off down at the Harbor Fire Department. And I can, if folks want to call my office, I can direct them where to go to be able to find the map that covers the area that they're living in.
Great. Yeah, I would suggest the library here. That would be a great place to have.
Yep, that would be so.
Yeah. So that was one of the maps. Was the other map similar?
I think at that meeting I had a map of the area of Harbor and Brookings, and possibly as far north as Pistol River.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So, I'm thinking about the topography of our environment here. And some of us live like 10 feet above sea level, but some of us live 110 feet above sea level. So it seems to me that you almost have to have like neighborhood plans. So
a neighborhood plan, presuming that you can work with your neighbors and everything, which is always my recommendation. If we're working together as a group, we have more resources and better information sharing, better ideas, or a larger batch of ideas to choose from. So I highly recommend folks come up with a neighborhood plan or a area plan and that sort of thing. And some folks will look at, say their house is at 60 feet. And I've heard people say, well, my house is at 60 feet. Unless the wave is 60 feet or higher, I don't worry about it. And my recommendation again there is go check the Dogami map to make sure, because just being 60 feet above sea level does not mean you're 100% going to be covered from a 60-foot or smaller wave, just because the wave can inundate further inland based on the type of topography of the ground, based on the topography of the seafloor, based on other factors that can be a little more difficult to kind of choose. And those are things that were covered when Dogami came up with those maps. They looked at those different inputs to those maps and to be able to determine how far inland that wave would possibly travel. So
when I think about a 60-foot wave coming into the cliff, for instance, I'm not a scientist, so this is not my strength. But if the wave is coming and it hits the cliff, is it going to move up? I mean, it feels like there's a whole lot of water behind that.
And that would be my concern, is that because there's so much force and so much pressure behind that wave, and I'm not a scientist either, or a geologist or a hydrologist or any of those things. I kind of trust that those folks that have put their effort into those,
like the Dogami map people, they know what they're talking about.
Yeah, those folks, I know that they have utilized best information as far as scientific information about the topography and about the geology of the area and hydrology and what happens when that much water starts moving. So I know there's a lot of pressure and a lot of force behind that water.
Yeah.
So my concern would be, how high up a 60-foot cliff is that water going to go? How high up and over is it going to go? And that sort of thing. So that's why I always look for, this is the worst case scenario.
Right.
It's not, in the case of where we're at here in the Oregon coast, you don't have to go to I-5 to be safe. You just have to get to the other side of that yellow and black line. When you look at the map, it's really not that far from most of our populated areas.
Right.
So that's why I would always tell folks, try not to get too hung up on the wave height or your elevation. Look at the map. What's worst case scenario? Is it just to go over there? Maybe just go over there. Right. Take your whatever supplies you have. Take the people you're responsible for and they're important to you. That sort of thing. Go to that other spot, to your pre-designated assembly area or evacuation point, and wait for the all clear to be called. And if we do end up with a large tsunami and you're lucky, your house is going to be there waiting for you, and the other important infrastructure is going to be there for you.
Right.
And if not, at least you are outside the danger area, and then we can move on from there. So
it's just, I think the reason why we don't want to think about it is because it's scary. I mean, it's scary to think that, you're going to have to move, go quick,
And it can be, and that's one of the reasons I really like the idea of trying to get as much education and preparation out as I can to folks, so that, again, the more prepared for it and the more educated you are about it, the less surprising it'll be, and the better you'll be pre-prepared for it, so that it won't be such an emotional or physical impact, is my hope.
So I had heard via the grapevine, which is the way we hear everything, right, that in a Cascadia event, it is possible that the whole thing is going to go back to I-5, that everything from I-5 west is going to get destroyed. It doesn't sound like you think that that's reality.
With a Cascadia event, we have two main effects. One is the earthquake itself. The earthquake itself is going to be, if it happens to the extent that scientists believe it will happen, it's going to be a devastating incident, the earthquake itself. They talk about a 9.0 or greater earthquake. In a circumstance like that, we're going to see extensive damage from the coastline all the way inland about to the area of the valley. And some areas will, depending on how built up it is, depending on how resilient the structures there are, which of course not a lot of our older structures are not going to be built to the code where they're supposed to be able to survive an incident like that.
Right.
So the earthquake is going to be a very devastating incident all by itself, and that will reach potentially into the valley. On the coast, we have the secondary prize, which is the large tsunami, which is going to follow between 15 and 25 minutes after the earthquake ends, my information. And that is not going to be something that travels all the way up into the valley. That'd be something that, like I said, on the Dogami maps will show how far that wave is expected to reach and affect the area. But again, we on the Oregon coast, or on the Pacific Northwest coast, this is not just Oregon, we're going to have to face the damage both from the earthquake and from the potential follow-on tsunami. So that's one of the things that as far as education goes, that's what I really would like our folks to be educated on, so that the more resilient we are to be able to be a little more self-sufficient, to be a little more prepared for that type of incident, the better off we'll be in being able to weather that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm thinking, okay, are we going to have any kind of warning that the Cascadia event is happening? Is there come on, Jeff, give me some hope here.
So my information is that our warning is going to be when the earthquake starts.
Wow. Okay.
And I'm not a scientist or a geologist. If there's any listening that can give us better information, I'm all ears. As it were.
Me too.
But my information is that when the earthquake starts, that's going to be our initial warning. The earthquake that is being described is an extremely hard earthquake, lots of shaking for 5 to 7 minutes.
Wow.
And it's been described to me as, because I haven't ever lived through a very large earthquake before, it's been described to me as an earthquake that makes it difficult to stand. And then 5 to 7 minutes of shaking, and then
That's a lot.
It is quite a bit.
It's a lot.
And then 15 to 25 minutes afterwards is when the tsunami is allegedly going to strike. Of course, in that circumstance, if we do have a large earthquake that fits that description, my recommendation is don't wait for anyone from the government to tell you to go. My recommendation would be to execute your individual or family or area evacuation plan and go to a safe area immediately. And just assume that that anybody working for the government would say, that's what we wanted you to
Right,
do.
exactly.
So, yes.
It seems like there will be some interesting difficulties, though, right? Because if we've got that kind of an earthquake, we've probably got, well, we definitely have bridges that are down. There's probably buildings that have come down all over the roads. There may be big craters in the roads it seems like it's going to be a little bit rough.
So that's my concern, is that it will create some level of damage to our infrastructure that we utilize for movement and everything else. Like you're talking about, the bridges, the roadways, liquefaction of the ground. There may be landslides, trees coming down. If you look at videos or pictures of other very large earthquakes and get an idea for the type of damage that can create, that may very well be something we face here, which is something when you're kind of deciding on your evacuation route, as it were. That's I kind of want folks not to just have this is where we're going and this is how we're getting there and that's it. I would like folks to have a primary plan. This is our primary spot to go to. And if for whatever reason we cannot reach that primary spot due to damage of infrastructure or traffic or something else that is slowing us down, to have a backup spot, or perhaps a backup spot and then maybe an emergency spot. And then have the ability to get to those spots in that 15 to 25 minute time zone, understanding that most everybody else in your area is going to be trying to do the same thing.
That's the clue, right? Because it's like we're all going to be on the same road trying to go in the same direction.
And that's one of the reasons I really would like folks to research what's going to be best for them, so that this is our primary spot we want to go to, and this is our primary route to get there. If this route is blocked, our secondary route is this one, and our secondary spot is this one. Or perhaps secondary route can take you to your primary evacuation spot. But have a plan. Have maybe a backup plan. Personally, for my family and I, our house, unfortunately, is in the inundation zone. The real estate market, you buy what you buy what's available.
I know.
It's a nice little place, but it is in the inundation zone. And my wife and I are required to be at work. So when this happens, it's not one of those things where we can just vanish from work. It's like, okay, now that this has all happened, we still have to go to work. So our evacuation plan is probably a little more robust than some folks are. We have 4 or 5 different routes to leave, couple 3 or 4 different places we're trying to get to, and a rapidly kind of loaded up pile of stuff, if we can get to it, that we're going to take with us so that we can be more resilient, so that if this incident happens, that we can evacuate ourselves, evacuate what we need to, and have enough supplies, have enough things that we need to sustain ourselves, so that once the shaking stops, once the waves are hitting, that at that point we can say, okay, we'll be fine to live for a little bit. It'd be a little rustic, but we're okay to live for a little bit. Now we have to go to work. So
do you have animals at home that, will also be needed to be evacuated?
We do, and we have a small collection of bulldogs. And so they are part of our evacuation plan, as well as sustainment for them. So
So do you have somebody else who's like your kind of go-to, that if everything starts to shake and bake, they pick up your dogs and run?
So we do have somebody who kind of looks in at our dogs during the day.
Great.
One of our neighbor folks that we have will look in on our dogs if we're both gone. And actually, during the tsunami warning that occurred on the 5th, I think she made contact with my wife, and when we were basically said, okay, go now if you have, because she has her own animals, of course, that sort of thing. Go now. Don't risk yourself. If the time doesn't allow it, then don't worry about it. We'll worry about that later. But go now. Be safe. If you have the opportunity, throw our dogs in the back seat, and we'll pick them up as soon as we get there. So,
and it's interesting because those kinds of things you don't immediately think about. But if I weren't home and my disabled husband is with my dog, there needs to be something in place. Obviously, part of our plan has to be that there needs to be somebody who will try to grab him and the dog.
Yes, correct. One of the things that, because we have adult care homes, and some of the adult care homes are not necessarily in the safest spots. One of the things I'll be doing here very shortly is contacting them to see if they have an evacuation plan, which I'm sure most all of them do, but just to see if they need assistance with making a more robust evacuation plan, seeing what resources each particular place would necessarily need. If, say, they are a smaller facility with a shorter staff, do they need to have like first responders show up to assist with an evacuation if those responders have an opportunity to do that? And if not, then they need to be listed on a kind of a higher priority area map so that we know that's where we need to go check. We need to have a different plan in place for those particular locations. And like I said, I'm assuming most places do have those plans in place, but
not really sure that's a great assumption, but
well, and that's one of the things I need to check on.
Exactly.
And if they don't have a plan in place, to assist them with maybe coming up with one.
It's kind of mind-boggling, really. The whole thing. So the way that we get notified at this point is USGS. Is that how we got the notification that first? Because I know there's Everbridge for the county, but I'm not sure how all of that plays together.
So the first warning we got on the 5th of December was actually what's called a WIA, which is a wireless emergency announcement, which is an automatic announcement that went over the wireless system through the cell system. And that was actually broadcast by the U.S. Geological Service for the earthquake.
Okay.
And then after that, we had follow-on messages that actually came from the National Tsunami Warning Center, following on the same type of system. The county has a subscription-based system called Everbridge, like you spoke about. And I highly, highly recommend that all citizens subscribe to that. It doesn't cost money, but you do need to sign up for it to make sure that you are on the list for your device. And it doesn't necessarily have to be a wireless device. It can be a hardline phone or email system or something else like that. And my goal is for that all citizens to have a multi-layered information reception system. So have a minimum of 2, 3 is better, systems in place to be able to receive emergency announcements. Fortunately, after the tsunami warning on the 5th and talking to the citizens and talking to first responders, I found very few people who didn't receive that message. And I would love to tell you why they didn't, but I can't. I really don't. I really don't know. I just know that the system's in place. The system, that's how they initially broadcast information on it. And almost everybody received that. I think I had a total of 91 citizens show up at my 6 different committee meetings. And of those 91 citizens, I think only 3, maybe 4, but 3 that I can remember said they did not receive the initial warning from that automatic emergency address that came over the wireless system.
Okay, that's good.
So that is pretty good.
Yeah.
The county's Everbridge system did not get a warning broadcast out on Everbridge.
Aww.
At the initial. There
What
was
happened?
there was an issue with the dispatches in the inundation zone. When they were evacuating, their backup radio system mounted in a vehicle would not boot up and start. it's something, there was a process in place to keep that going, to make sure it was going to work. I know it was tested. I did work for the sheriff's office for a little while. It wasn't my primary mission, but that system just decided that it was not a good day for it, and it didn't want to start. So I know that the system has been since repaired, and they have had a more robust system in place for that vehicle and the radio system on board to get going. But they were not able to send out that initial Everbridge warning. I know they were able to send one out to cancel the issue. I know it sounds like a day late, dollar short. They're working hard to make sure that doesn't happen again. And I'm working hard to make sure that whatever assistance I can offer for any of the agencies is in place. And if it's something I can help with, making sure that a system is more robust, that's one of the things I'm definitely working on. But because that system didn't get a broadcast sent out, and because a few people did not get the automatic wireless emergency address, that's why I tell folks I really think it's important that we have multiple systems in place to be able to receive emergency notifications. And it's not just for, say, a tsunami. That can be for any type of emergency we're facing. But again, I highly recommend folks sign up for Everbridge. If you're in an area where you don't necessarily have great cell reception, perhaps get yourself a NOAA radio or marine radio set up on the emergency frequencies. That they're not a huge investment, but they can be set up where they don't broadcast all the time until an emergency is broadcast, and then the radio comes up and then starts telling you what that emergency message is.
Because I'm thinking that in a substantial earthquake, the cell towers could go down.
Yes, it is possible the cell towers go down, which again is why if there's a large earthquake, I tell folks don't wait for the government to tell you to go. Just go. Assume we want you to.
Right.
And get away from the water. But that is a very possible part of our infrastructure that's going to fail, is our cell system. Even there was some reports of cellular phones not receiving all their phone calls even on the 5th. I was operating 2 cell phones. My system was operating another one to try to make sure we were, getting notifications out. We were talking to other responders, answering phone calls. And at one point, one of my phones died and locked up because of the amount of calls coming in.
Wow.
So I had to shut it down, restart it, and then take off from there again. So even a circumstance like that, where we did not necessarily have a large event happening, it was just a reported one that we were getting prepared for. Even that amount of communication created a few hiccups in our communication system.
And you're not going to know until you're in the middle of it, right?
Correct.
I mean,
yes.
We can have dry runs like that, but we're not actually going to know until we're in the middle of it.
Correct. And that's one of the things that I've been asked a lot about. Well, these bridges are going to be down. What's going to happen? I said, well, I can't tell you which bridges are going to survive, which bridges aren't, which areas of the roadway is going to be passable, and which ones aren't. So be prepared for a couple different evacuation routes, have a couple different notification systems, that sort of thing. In case any of this infrastructure does fail, have a multi-layered response plan so that you can receive your information, so that you know where you plan to go if you need to evacuate from your residence for some reason or another, either from a tsunami or from a wildfire or other different reasons why you may have to evacuate. So,
yeah, and our thought here at the radio station is that most people will have access to a radio in their car. So this would be a good way of getting information out to people if they're listening to the radio.
Correct. And you guys are actually on our distant tsunami notification list, is to contact this radio station. And there's another couple that are on our list that may or may not even be in our immediate area, but just to make sure that information is going out, because you can't guarantee someone's not listening to a radio station from, say, Del Norte or from Coos County area.
No, exactly. Yeah, so that's the whole kind of tsunami and earthquake side. The fire side is a whole different. It's a whole different scenario as far as I'm concerned. It's like that doesn't happen. Boom, like that. You usually know it's coming. You can usually see the smoke starting to. You can't forget what the Chetco Bar fire looked like if you were here. It It was pretty darn scary.
Yeah, it was, from my understanding. I wasn't here then, but I was an initial responder to the flat fire and also to a couple of other wildfires we had summer before last. But a similar type of a program or similar plan for your household will assist with your wildfire issue. As far as wildfires go, obviously you can prepare a little bit for that also. You can work on defensible space around your residence by having brush cleared back and whatnot. There's all kinds of documents and information available to the public. I can direct you to some, and your fire agencies can also direct you to those about getting your residents and your driveways and your neighborhoods more prepared for wildfire defense and to be a little more resilient for that. Again, like you said, you should have a little bit of pre-warning for that. Dispatch also sends out Everbridge notices for different areas to advise them on what level of evacuation they may be under. You have the 3 levels of evacuation for a wildfire, be prepared to go, be ready to go at a moment's notice, and then, of course, go now.
Yep.
And that sort of thing. And we highly recommend folks get signed up for Everbridge so they can listen to those messages. When I worked for the sheriff's office, we did go door to door to try to tell folks when a fire was close enough to a populated area. And I remember thinking, this is moving very quickly, and we are moving very quickly to try to notify folks. And of course, you have usually lots of questions when folks are not, well, what do you mean there's a fire? Trust me, there's a fire coming.
Trust me. Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, the sooner and more reliably you can receive information gives you that much more opportunity or time to be able to enact your own plan to whether or not you're going to evacuate, where you're going to go, what you're going to take, all that sort of stuff. So that's my ultimate goal again, was to try to get folks to get information received as quickly as possible, to have at least something of a plan on place for as far as either I'm evacuating from my residence or I'm going to stay here and kind of hunker down in my residence, and then have a plan for sustainment for themselves while they're either evacuating or while they're locking down their residence.
Because I'm thinking, I live very close to the bluff that goes into the ocean. That is really a great place to be in a wildfire because I'm really close to the water, and it's probably not going to get to me. It has to go through everything before it gets to me. So I'm not sure that I would want to evacuate into the hills, which is where I would go for a tsunami, because the hills are going to burn first, I would think.
And that's one of the, like I said, for the event of a wildfire, like the wildfire we had summer before last up off of Grassy Knob, north of Port Orford, and the fire burned kind of around the backside of town. Again, I was working in public safety, so I'm paying attention to where it's at. I'm paying attention to my plan to leave because, again, if I have to leave my residence or my wife and I have to leave my residence, we have to go back to work.
Yep.
So I can't just evacuate and then worry about myself. I have to go back and go to do my job. So our plan was a little more robust, like I talked about before. For our personal plan, it was a little more robust, like I talked about before, for the evacuation. But also, as far as, like, say, a wildfire, I'm paying attention to how far that's burning. I'm watching the fire maps. I'm watching that information to see which direction is it going. If I have to leave, is it better to go north or is it better to go south? Or maybe it's something I can run east if I have an east to west road that'll get me somewhere I need to be. I know during one of those fires that was up north off Grassy Knob, we kind of pre-loaded some stuff in one of our spare vehicles because I had a work vehicle and then we each have a POV, and moved my POV somewhere else because if I'm evacuating and I have to go to work, obviously I'm taking my work vehicle with me.
Right.
So we preloaded one of our vehicles and moved out somewhere that's going to be in a safe area outside the fire zone to a friend or family member's house, that sort of thing. But again, with the fire, you may be able to go to the hills. It depends on where the fire is at, which direction is it going,
Right.
What is the potential that it's going to change directions, because it will follow the wind and change directions and move based on the topography of an area, depending on how the ground is. That's why I believe it's also real important in that circumstance for citizens to kind of accept the fact that that's part of our life is potential wildfires, and that say, okay, this is something I need to be prepared for, because what works for me in my neighborhood may or may not be what a person a mile and a half north of me needs to worry about, because they may need to go a different direction. They may need to take different stuff with them based on their personal family and that sort of thing. So coming up with an individual plan that helps with evacuating, whether it's from a tsunami or from wildfire, is an extremely important thing I think citizens need to work on. So
it was shocking to me how quickly the wildfire moved in the Palisades in Los Angeles. Who would have expected it to go that fast?
Yeah, especially in an urban area like that. And I suppose we probably should just accept the fact that even though there probably is not as much undergrowth and not as many trees and not as much other natural stuff growing in between houses, because it looks to me like some of the areas that burned, the houses are packed right up next to each other.
Yeah.
But those houses are packed right up next to each other. So once they start burning, it's probably like a very flammable batch of undergrowth and trees that just happen to be man-made and set in a little grid. So,
and I'm not sure that we actually get as dry here as like Southern California. I mean, they've been in a drought for quite a while. So, I'm not sure.
Yes.
But again, I'm not sure, right? And you don't know until it starts.
Yeah. And I bet a lot of those folks would love to have the opportunity to go back and do just a little pre-planning.
Yes.
And say, wow, I needed to prepare. A little late for me right now, but I needed to prepare to be ready to leave with, stuff to sustain myself, my family, important documents, that sort of thing, and have a little bit of a plan, knowing what I'm going to do and where I'm going to go.
Is there a checklist anywhere?
So there are some good checklists. The state and the federal government has a program called 2 Weeks Ready, or Be 2 Weeks Ready. And that's available online. If you Googled Be 2 Weeks Ready, it will take you to a couple different locations, a couple different websites, and that will have information that you can look at that will give you checklists. It can, the recommendation is to be, the reason they call it 2 Weeks Ready is to be, ready for 2 weeks of either sustainment at your location or sustainment at a location that you've evacuated to, so that you're a little more resilient and that sort of thing in case there's interruption in services, interruption at stores where goods are available, either groceries or supplies or things like that. And if you have the essential stuff saved up so that you can sustain yourself for a couple of weeks, that gives everybody a chance to get stuff, gives responders a chance to get fires put out and infrastructure rebuilt, at least until we can get more goods flowing and that sort of thing. And so yes, there's also, if you Googled Coos County or Curry County Be 2 Weeks Ready, the emergency management offices at Coos County and Curry County, my predecessor, worked together to build a similar book, which we call, it's the same, it's similar, like very similar as Be 2 Weeks Ready, but that is a Coos and Curry County specific book. There are some that you can pick up at my office in Gold Beach. It's also available online in a digital format, and a new version of that is in the process of being printed right now, which will have very similar information. It's just slightly better illustrations, better photographs and things like that, just kind of more palatable look to it. So,
and I think that people don't always remember that if you've got a go bag, you probably should like swap out the contents occasionally, like if you've got food in there. Because I don't think about that,
And it's one of those things I definitely recommend. If you do have a go bag or a go box or a couple of them, just every now and again, like maybe even set a time on the calendar. It's pick a day that works good for you. It's St. Patrick's Day, so we're gonna celebrate St. Patrick's Day. But the day after St. Patrick's Day, we're just gonna go through our boxes and make sure that our boxes and bags are up to date. Make sure everything that we think is in there is there. And then we can check them again, say the day before Halloween. Again, those are just random times and dates thrown out there. But if it's something you're just randomly checking it, and you know that way, you know exactly what you have in that, exactly what you have available in your supplies and that sort of thing, and what needs to be replaced, upgraded, or something else like that. Because
your needs will also change. My husband is more disabled now than he was, say, a year or two ago. So my needs have changed. There are definitely things I'm going to need now. And medicine, that was another thing that was like, wow, because he takes a lot of medication. So really we should have either a bag that we can grab or, it gets complicated.
It does. It can get a little complicated, especially when it comes to medication. I know that depending what medications folks have, doctors' offices may or may not want to issue out a prescription for more than you're going to need over a certain amount of time, and there are rules that govern that.
Yep.
But maybe have those in a location or a type of portable spot that if you need to grab them, you can grab the batch and go. Or if you can get a prescription that gives you a few more you can have more on hand and that sort of thing, then have those packed up and ready to go. Or if it's something that's a necessity, that probably needs to be item 1 or 2 on your list, on your checklist for, okay, we're leaving in 5 minutes. Let's go through our checklist and make sure that, okay, important medication, important documents, go bag 1, go bag 2, dog food, whatever else you needed is clicked off and loaded up and that sort of thing.
What do you think about us getting help? like let's say we've got a catastrophic event, right? I mean, we're not number one, are we? I mean,
so here in Curry County, our population level, our population density, that is not as high as it is in other places. Now, places like Portland are not going to have the issue with tsunami. However, Portland is going to suffer some of the issues from a large cascade level of earthquake. The further east you go from the coastline, the less affected that area is going to be. And when you look at the map of the United States, the actual area affected is just going to be the Pacific Northwest, stretching down into northern, maybe central California. But it's going to be the coastline and then a little ways inland. So that leaves a whole batch of the country that can come give us some assistance. I know like a lot of places sent assistance and personnel to, say, Katrina in New Orleans, the areas of North Carolina that were affected by Hurricane Helene, areas that were affected in Florida. A lot of times when you have a big disaster like that, there's a large mobilization throughout the United States. This is going to be a similar circumstance. That it's going to be a potentially very large disaster. It's going to be one of those things where the country is going to mobilize and come assist us as we've assisted other folks.
Right.
Again, I think the better prepared we are and the more resilient we are, the better off we'll be, because I can't tell you that we're going to get in Curry County that Brookings and Gold Beach and Port Orford and Langlois and Pistol River, I can't guarantee you we're going to see ships of supplies offshore in a couple days within this incident. I hope that happens, but I can't guarantee
that. Because that would be what we would need, right? I mean, the airports won't be functional.
Well, and a couple of airports have been upgraded and that sort of thing. The airport in Brookings is out of the inundation zone. The airport at Cape Blanco is also out of the inundation zone and has recently been upgraded.
Great.
It's actually, I believe, the largest airport on the southern coast to be able to accept fixed-wing aircraft.
Really?
It's the weather can still a little dicey up there, so that may or may not play havoc with that. But we are going to receive assistance. Are we going to receive as much assistance as, say, Seattle? Probably not, because our population density is not as heavy down here as it is up there. Plus the damage that Seattle's going to see, both from the earthquake and from the tsunamis, could be quite significant.
Yep.
It may take a little longer for assistance to get to us, but by the same token, we have citizens and resources and agencies and whatnot, even just as far east as Medford. Those places are going to be affected by the earthquake, yes, not to the same extent as we are.
Yeah.
So there's a very good chance that we may see rotary aircraft, fixed-wing aircraft, supplies and assistance in the form of agencies and National Guard units and that sort of thing. And that's going to be one of the things that is going to be one of my primary goals. If that happens, if that type of incident happens, that's going to be one of my big jobs right there, is making sure that injured personnel receive the care they need, even if that's somewhere else to the east, and supplies and important personnel that we need to get ourselves back on our feet are coming west to us.
Right. And I spoke recently with Karen Dagenet from the Red Cross, and she was saying, yes, absolutely. The Red Cross is here. They've already got caches of supplies that, they can access in an emergency, and that people from the Red Cross will be coming in as soon as they know that there's an emergency, which is a great thing to have, right?
Yes.
The more people coming in, the better. And I'm assuming you've got other community organizations that you're working with to make sure, because it's a huge job, right?
Well, and there are other community organizations where I am trying to tie in with, and that sort of thing. I'm also trying to help, hopefully help stand some new ones up.
Great.
And that sort of thing. We don't have a very active CERT infrastructure here, which is community emergency response teams.
Right.
There's a few people in the county that are well-versed in that can train folks for that have brought a lot of interest in standing up CERT teams.
Good.
And that's something I would like to see happen.
Good.
Especially as the year goes on, it's going to be one of my goals is to try to help areas stand up CERT teams. Those areas don't necessarily have to be, say, like the county. Those areas can be like neighborhoods, neighborhoods, church organizations, that sort of thing. So
great. So, Jeff, we're just about out of time.
Okay.
It's amazing to me how fast it goes. It just always goes. And I feel like there's so many more things I want to ask you. So you got to promise me you're going to come back.
I can definitely come back. So.
Oh, God.
And I will definitely be out in the public. There will definitely be follow-on meetings.
Great.
Similar to the one we had, the other ones we had about tsunami information. I will definitely be out in the public to speak more.
And if you let us know, we will run PSAs for it and make sure that our public knows.
Very good. I will absolutely do that.
Great. So thank you very much, Jeff Hughes, our new emergency manager for Curry County. Thank you so much for showing up. And thank you for listening. My guest today has been Jeffrey Hughes, the emergency manager for Curry County, talking about disaster preparedness, response, and recovery. You can access this as a podcast on our website, kciw.org, as well as streaming it. It really isn't a question of if, but rather when, and it's best to be ready. And as Jeff says, have a plan, or two, or three. I'm Candace Michelle, and this is Our Community.